The most powerful empire in history once paid protection money to a kingdom they called Barbarians. Let that sink in for a moment. 8 million sesterces every year, plus engineers, builders, and military experts. Rome was literally funding its own enemy. This is not a myth or legend, this actually happened, and that kingdom was called Dacia, a name most people have never even heard of. Dacia sat in the Carpathian Mountains, right where Romania is today, controlling the lands around the mighty Danube River. This was no minor tribal territory scratching for survival on the edge of civilization. Dacia was a genuine military power. At full strength, they could mobilize up to 250,000 warriors from their network of allied tribes across the region. But what made Rome hungry was not Dacian manpower or military strength. It was something far more valuable and irresistible to emperors: gold. Dacia possessed the richest gold and silver mines in all of Europe. Mountains literally filled with precious metals. Their capital, Sarmizegetusa Regia, sat high in the mountains. A fortress city protected by some of the most brutal terrain on Earth. To reach it, any invader would have to march through narrow mountain passes where ambushes waited behind every rock and tree. And leading this mountain kingdom was a man named Decebalus, a name that would haunt Roman emperors for the next 20 years. Decebalus was not his birth name. It was a title meaning strong as 10 men. He earned it through blood and brilliant strategy. And here is what makes this remarkable. His own enemies praised him as a master of both the theory and practice of warfare. That praise came from Cassius Dio, a Roman historian. When your enemy calls you a military genius, you know you are the real deal. Decebalus knew when to advance and when to retreat. He mastered ambushes in the forest and pitched battles on open ground. He unified the scattered Dacian tribes into a single fighting force, something no leader before him had ever managed to accomplish. He built a network of stone fortresses across the Oresti Mountains, each one designed to bleed any Roman army that came close. And he transformed Dacia from a regional nuisance into the most dangerous threat Rome faced anywhere on its northern frontier. In 85 AD, Decebalus decided Rome had grown soft enough. It was time to test just how weak the empire had truly become. Dacian warriors crossed the frozen Danube River and poured into Moesia, a Roman province that had never seen such a devastating attack. The provincial governor, Oppius Sabinus, a former consul and member of the Roman elite, was killed in the initial assault. This was not a raid for plunder or a quick grab for slaves. This was an open declaration of war against the Roman Empire itself. Emperor Domitian could not ignore this insult to Roman pride. He decided to lead the legions himself and crush these northern barbarians. But what awaited him at the Tapae Pass would shatter Roman confidence and change the balance of power for a generation. Domitian arrived in Moesia and spent months reorganizing his forces. He was determined to make the Dacians pay for their arrogance. In 86 or 87 AD, he handed command to Cornelius Fuscus, the prefect of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal army. Fuscus led 5 or 6 legions across the Danube on a pontoon bridge. Tens of thousands of Rome's finest soldiers marching to war. The Roman army pushed deep into Dacian territory. Through abandoned villages, across empty plains, meeting almost no resistance at all. Any other general might have been suspicious. But Fuscus kept marching forward, eager for glory and confident in Roman superiority. He did not realize he was walking straight into a trap. Decebalus was watching every step, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When the Romans reached the Tapae Pass, the narrow gateway into the Dacian heartland, Decebalus finally made his move. The Dacians attacked from every direction at once. From the hillsides, from behind rocks, from places the Romans never expected. The mountain terrain became a killing ground. Roman soldiers could not form their famous battle lines in the narrow rocky passes. They were slaughtered like cattle in a pen. Attacked from above, with no room to maneuver and no way to use their superior numbers. Cornelius Fuscus, the Praetorian prefect, one of the most powerful men in Rome, fell on the battlefield surrounded by his dead guards. the sacred eagle standard of the Praetorian Guard was captured by the Dacians. A humiliation Rome had not suffered in generations. And an entire legion, the 5th Alaudae, was completely wiped out. Not a single soldier escaped to tell what had happened in that pass. This disaster ranked alongside the Teutoburg Forest massacre. Rome had lost thousands of elite soldiers in a single afternoon of carnage. Domitian had no choice but to retreat and lick his wounds. The barbarians he had come to crush had instead crushed his best army. In 88 AD, he sent General Tetius Julianus with fresh legions for another attempt. This time Rome managed to win at Tapae. But before Julianus could march on Sarmizegetusa and finish the job, terrible news arrived from Germania on the western frontier. A Roman general had rebelled against Domitian. The emperor had to pull his legions back immediately or risk losing his own throne. Facing war on two fronts simultaneously, Domitian made a decision that would haunt Rome for the next decade and beyond. In 89 AD, he signed a peace treaty with Decebalus. On paper, the Dacian king submitted to Rome and acknowledged Roman authority, but the reality was exactly the opposite. Rome was paying tribute to Dacia, 8 million sesterces every single year, and it got worse than just money. Rome sent engineers, builders, and military experts to help Decebalus strengthen his kingdom. Think about that for a moment. Domitian had just handed his enemy the tools to build an even more powerful military machine. Decebalus used Roman money to buy better weapons and train more warriors. He was getting stronger while Rome paid for the privilege. He used Roman engineers to build stronger fortresses with techniques the Dacians had never known. Rome was arming its own future enemy, and he used 10 years of peace to prepare for the war he knew would eventually come. Every day, Dacia grew more dangerous. This was one of the most humiliating arrangements in all of Roman history. The great empire paying protection money to mountain barbarians. And the money Rome sent to buy peace would come back to haunt them. But that reckoning would arrive under a very different emperor. In 98 AD, a new man took the throne. His name was Trajan, and he was nothing like the emperor who came before him. Trajan was a career soldier, hardened by decades of warfare on the frontiers. He had earned his position through military excellence. 42 years old when he became emperor, Cassius Dio wrote that he had neither the recklessness of youth nor the sluggishness of age. Trajan looked at the humiliating treaty with Dacia and the annual payments flowing north. He made a simple decision. Enough. He began preparing for war immediately. Not a punitive raid, but a full-scale invasion designed to destroy Dacia completely. 13 to 14 legions gathered in Moesia over the following months, more than 100,000 soldiers ready for war. This was the largest military force Rome had assembled in decades. Trajan was not taking any chances with the Dacian threat. In the spring of 101 AD, Trajan himself led the army across the Danube on a pontoon bridge at Viminacium. The legions marched north toward the Tapae pass, the same pass where Fuscus had died and an entire legion had been annihilated. Decebalus knew the Romans were coming. He sent a message warning Trajan to turn back and keep the peace they had established. Trajan did not even bother to reply. Some messages deserve no answer. His response would come in blood and iron, not words. The two armies met at Tapae. This time Trajan had prepared carefully. He would not repeat the mistakes that killed Fuscus. The battle was absolutely brutal. Both sides took heavy casualties as they fought across the rocky terrain of the mountain pass. Roman wounded filled the camps afterward. So many injured soldiers that the medical supplies ran out completely within hours. Then Trajan did something remarkable. He tore his own imperial robes into strips and used them to bandage his wounded soldiers. Cassius Dio recorded this detail carefully. The emperor himself kneeling in the dirt, binding wounds like a common army physician. Rome won at Tapae, but winter was approaching fast. Trajan decided to halt his advance and wait for better weather in the spring. But Decebalus was not the type to sit idle during winter. He immediately began planning a counterattack to relieve the pressure. He formed an alliance with the Roxolani and Bastane tribes from the eastern steppes. Together they would strike at Roman territory. In the winter of 101 to 102 AD, the combined force launched an attack south into Moesia itself. The Dacian coalition crossed the frozen Danube River, but the ice was not thick enough to support so many thousands of warriors. The ice cracked and broke under their weight. Many drowned in the freezing water, pulled down by their own weapons and armor. Trajan wheeled his army from the mountains and gave chase to the survivors. He would not let this opportunity slip away from him. The decisive battle came at Adamclisi in the flat lands of Moesia. Both armies committed everything they had to this single fight. The casualties on both sides were catastrophic. This was not a quick victory, but a grinding, bloody battle of attrition. Rome won in the end. But between 3,000 and 4,000 Roman soldiers died. Their names were later carved into a stone altar. That memorial still exists today at Adamclisi. Not statistics, but individual names. Real men who died fighting in a foreign land. In 102 AD, Trajan advanced towards Sarmizegetusa. Decebalus saw he could not stop the Roman advance any longer. He sent messengers asking for peace terms, anything to stop the destruction and preserve what remained of his battered kingdom. Trajan agreed to peace, but his conditions were brutal. Dacia had to surrender all weapons and demolish its mountain fortresses. Roman garrisons would occupy key positions throughout the kingdom. Decebalus had to accept Roman soldiers on his own territory. The Dacian king agreed to everything and formally surrendered. But everyone on both sides knew this peace would not last, and Trajan knew it too. So while the treaty ink was still drying, he began building something the world had never seen before. Trajan gave the most important engineering project in Roman history to Apollodorus of Damascus, a genius architect and builder. The mission seemed impossible. Build a permanent bridge across the Danube River, the widest and most treacherous river in Europe. At this location, the Danube was 800 meters wide. The current was powerful, and the riverbed was soft mud. Every engineer said it could not be done. The river was simply too wide and too dangerous for any bridge technology that existed. Apollodorus looked at the problem and said one word: watch. Then he set thousands of workers to the most ambitious project in history. First, he diverted the river's flow using temporary channels. This exposed sections of the riverbed where work could begin. 20 massive stone pillars rose from the riverbed. Each one stood dozens of meters tall, built from brick and Roman cement. Wooden arches were constructed on top, connecting the pillars across the vast width of the river in graceful curving spans. The final result was staggering. A bridge stretching 1,135 meters, more than a full kilometer long. This was instantly the longest arch bridge anywhere in the world. Nothing even came close to matching its incredible scale. And that record stood for over 1,000 years afterward. No one would build a longer arch bridge until the medieval period. Cassius Dio wrote about the bridge with obvious awe. He said it proved there is nothing that human ingenuity cannot accomplish. Meanwhile, Decebalus was violating every single term of the peace treaty. He was betting everything on one final confrontation. He rebuilt his fortresses and rearmed his warriors. He sent ambassadors to forge new alliances with hostile tribes in every direction. In 105 AD, the Roman Senate officially declared Decebalus an enemy of Rome. The pretense of peace was finally over. This time, Trajan would accept nothing less than total victory. He would destroy Dacia completely or die trying to accomplish it. Roman legions crossed the new bridge with terrifying speed and efficiency. No more slow pontoon bridges slowing down the advance. Supplies flowed continuously across the Danube. Fresh troops could arrive in days instead of weeks. The bridge changed everything. The Roman army advanced into Dacia from multiple directions simultaneously. Decebalus could not defend against so many attackers. One by one, the fortresses in the Oresti Mountains fell. Each one that Decebalus had spent years building and strengthening. By the summer of 106 AD, Roman legions stood before the gates of Sarmizegetusa Regia, the heart of the Dacian kingdom. The siege began. Roman engineers brought up their siege equipment while soldiers surrounded the city, cutting off all escape routes. The Dacians fought back with desperate courage. They actually managed to repel the first Roman assault on the walls. But Rome had an advantage that went beyond simple military strength. They had engineering knowledge that Dacia could not match. A Dacian nobleman betrayed his own people. He showed the Romans exactly where the underground pipes carried water into the city. Roman soldiers found the water supply and destroyed it completely. Sarmizegetusa would now die of thirst if it did not surrender. Inside the walls, people began suffering immediately. No water for drinking or cooking or fighting the fires that Rome would start. Roman soldiers breached a section of the wall and poured burning oil inside. The interior of the city erupted into flames. The elderly high priest Vezina, the spiritual leader of the Dacian people, died in the inferno, along with countless others. Decebalus watched his capital burning and knew he could not save it, but he refused to die in the flames like a trapped animal. He gathered a small band of his most loyal followers and escaped into the night. Sarmizegetusa would fall, but he would fight on. The city fell shortly after. Roman soldiers swarmed through the burning streets, taking everything of value they could carry. Sarmizegetusa Regia was razed completely to the ground. The proud capital that had defied Rome for decades ceased to exist. But Decebalus was still alive and still dangerous. He planned to reach Porolissum in the north and continue guerrilla resistance. Roman cavalry units were dispatched immediately with orders to capture or kill the Dacian king. The hunt was on across the mountains. They caught up to him in a forest somewhere in the Carpathians. Decebalus and his small group were completely surrounded. There was no escape this time. Roman horsemen closed in from every direction. Surrender or death were the only remaining options. And Decebalus made his final choice. He would not give Rome the satisfaction of parading him through the streets in chains. He drew his curved Dacian blade, the Sica, the weapon that had become a symbol of his people's fierce independence. Decebalus cut his own throat beneath an oak tree. He died on his feet as a free man rather than live as a Roman prisoner. The Roman cavalry arrived just moments too late to capture him alive. They found him dying in the grass, blood everywhere. This final moment was carved permanently into Trajan's column in Rome. Scene 145 shows exactly what happened. Decebalus slashing his throat while a Roman horseman reaches for him. One of the most dramatic images in all of Roman art. His head was cut from his body and brought back to Rome as proof of victory. The war was finally over after 20 years. That head was thrown down the Gemonian stairs, the place where Romans executed criminals, a final humiliation for a fallen king. But the story of Decebalus did not end with his death. He had planned one final act of defiance against his Roman conquerors. Before the end came, Decebalus had ordered his most precious treasure hidden where the Romans would never find it. He commanded his servants to divert the Sargetia River that flowed near his mountain palace. Expose the riverbed completely. Workers dug a massive pit in the exposed riverbed. Then they filled it with the accumulated wealth of the Dacian kingdom. Hundreds of thousands of kilograms of gold and silver artifacts went into that pit. The treasure of generations of Dacian kings. Then the river was allowed to flow back over the hiding place. The treasure disappeared beneath the rushing water completely, and the prisoners who had done the work, Decebalus ordered every single one of them killed. Dead men tell no secrets. It was the perfect hiding place. The treasure would remain safe forever beneath the flowing river. Or so Decebalus believed. But he made one critical mistake. He forgot about Basilis, one of his own trusted companions who knew where the treasure lay. Basilis was captured by Roman soldiers after the fall of Sarmizegetusa, and when questioned, he told them absolutely everything. Roman engineers diverted the river again and dug up the treasure exactly where Basilis said it would be, every last piece of it. Modern historians estimate the hoard contained about 165,000 kilograms of gold, an almost unimaginable amount, plus roughly 331,000 kilograms of silver, together nearly 500,000 kilograms of precious metal. Trajan brought all of it back to Rome and celebrated for 123 days straight, more than 4 months of festivities. He used the treasure to build Trajan's Forum, one of the most magnificent public spaces ever constructed in the ancient world, and Trajan's Column with its 155 scenes carved in stone, a spiral documentary of the Dacian wars rising to the sky. That column still stands today in the heart of Rome, an ancient movie preserved in marble telling the story of how Dacia died. But here is the irony that proves history has a sense of humor. That magnificent bridge Trajan spent years building across the Danube, Hadrian, the very next emperor, ordered it dismantled almost immediately after taking power. He was afraid of what he had inherited. He worried that the barbarians might use the bridge to invade Roman territory. The greatest engineering achievement became a liability. Dacia became a Roman province, wealthy from its gold mines but constantly threatened by hostile tribes pressing from every direction. In 271 AD, Rome officially abandoned Dacia. The province was simply too expensive and dangerous to maintain. But the legacy of Decebalus and Trajan never died. It echoes through the centuries in ways neither of them could have imagined. Today, Romania considers both men as founding fathers of their nation. The conquered and the conqueror united as common ancestors. Enemies who fought to the death now share the same pedestal in the national identity. History has strange ways of resolving conflicts. In 1994, a Romanian businessman named Iosif Constantin Dragan started what many called an insane vanity project. He wanted to carve the face of Decebalus into a cliff overlooking the Danube River, a monument to match anything the Romans built. The project took 10 years and cost millions of dollars. Workers carved 40 meters of solid rock into a human face. When finished, it was the largest rock sculpture anywhere in Europe. Decebalus gazing eternally across the river he once defended. And here is the detail that transforms this from monument to message. Look at where they placed it on the riverbank. The sculpture sits directly across from Tabula Traiana. That is the victory inscription that Trajan carved to celebrate his conquest. 2,000 years after their war ended, Decebalus is still staring directly into the eyes of his Roman conqueror across the water. The confrontation between these two men never really ended, it just moved from the battlefield to the landscape itself. Dacia as a kingdom is gone forever. Its cities burned, its people scattered, its independence crushed by Roman military power.